The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a warm, intimate gathering. 20 people, just our closest family and friends, all tucked into a private room at the Grand Oak Estate. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over tables dressed in ivory. I remember arriving precisely on time, wearing the navy dress Chloe had helped me pick out weeks earlier. She'd even FaceTimed me from the boutique, holding up options against her phone while I juggled conference calls. "The navy one, Mom," she'd insisted, her face bright with excitement. "It brings out your eyes, and it photographs beautifully." Photography mattered to Chloe. As a visual designer, she built her career on transforming brands through curated aesthetics. Every detail of her wedding had been considered, debated, and refined. Invitations featured hand-pressed flowers. The reception overlooked the harbor at sunset. Even tonight's menu had been tested during 3 separate tastings. I'd watched her plan this wedding for 14 months, ever since Ethan proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. He'd chosen a scenic overlook at dawn, hired a photographer to capture the moment, and presented a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Chloe called me, sobbing happy tears, minutes after saying yes. "He's perfect, Mom," she'd whispered. "Everything about this feels right." Ethan worked as a project manager at the marketing firm I'd founded 23 years ago. My company, Hawthorne and Associates, had started in my garage apartment, just me and a laptop, pitching branding services to local businesses. 2 decades of strategic growth had transformed it into a regional powerhouse. Chloe joined our creative team 5 years ago, fresh from design school, determined to prove herself without special treatment. She'd done more than prove herself. Her portfolio spoke volumes, winning awards and landing accounts that expanded our footprint into luxury markets. When she started dating Ethan from project management, I stayed carefully neutral. Office romances required delicate handling, especially when your daughter works under your leadership. But Ethan seemed genuine. He arrived early, stayed late, and treated every client deliverable like his personal reputation depended on it. His parents lived 2 hours north in Prescott, where his father, Arthur, owned a commercial real estate development company. Old money, from what I gathered, the kind that came with unspoken expectations about bloodlines and social standing. I'd met them twice before tonight. Once at Chloe's apartment for a casual dinner, where his mother, Eleanor, barely touched the homemade lasagna and asked pointed questions about my educational background. The second time was at their country club for brunch, where Arthur spent 40 minutes discussing property portfolios while barely acknowledging my presence. Both encounters left me uneasy, though I couldn't articulate why. Something in Eleanor's tight smile when she learned I'd built my business from nothing. The way Arthur's eyes glazed over when Chloe mentioned her design awards. Small moments that felt like paper cuts, too minor to complain about, but sharp enough to sting. Chloe noticed. "They're just old-fashioned," she'd explained. "Ethan says they'll warm up once we're married. They're protective because he's their only son." I'd accepted that explanation because I wanted to believe it. Because Chloe glowed when she talked about Ethan, and I'd raised her to think independently. My opinions about his parents shouldn't override her happiness. So, I arrived at the rehearsal dinner with an open mind and a genuine smile. Chloe greeted me at the door with a tight hug, looking radiant in a cream silk blouse and tailored pants. "You look beautiful, Mom. Come meet everyone." The room held a mix of both families and close friends. I recognized Ethan's parents immediately, holding court near the fireplace with several couples I didn't know. Eleanor wore pearls, an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Arthur gestured broadly while talking, his voice carrying across conversations. I found my assigned seat between Chloe's college roommate, Brooke, and my business partner, Michael, who had flown in from Portland for the wedding. The placement felt deliberate, surrounding me with allies. Chloe probably anticipated tension and created a buffer zone. Dinner service began with butternut squash soup. Conversations flowed around me, the pleasant buzz of people enjoying good food and wine. I chatted with Brooke about her new job in publishing, listened to Michael's stories about his teenage daughter's soccer tournaments, and tried to ignore the occasional glances from Eleanor across the room. The main course arrived as the sun set outside the tall windows. Filet mignon with roasted vegetables, plated like artwork. I was cutting into the tender meat when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Ethan stood behind my chair, his face carefully neutral. He leaned down, speaking in a low voice. "My parents don't want you at our wedding," he said quietly, his breath warm against my ear. "You can stream it online." The words hung in the air like smoke from extinguished candles. I set down my fork with deliberate care, the silver clicking softly against china. My heart hammered against my ribs, but years of business negotiations had taught me to control my physical reactions. I turned slowly to face him, maintaining the slight smile I'd worn all evening. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" My voice stayed level, professionally pleasant. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You heard me. My parents feel it would be more appropriate if you watched remotely. We'll make sure you have access to the live stream." Around us, conversations continued. No one else had heard his quiet declaration. I glanced past him toward Chloe, who was laughing at something her maid of honor had said, completely unaware that her fiancé had just uninvited her mother from her wedding. I considered my options. I could make a scene, raising my voice to ensure everyone understood what Ethan had just suggested. I could leave immediately, forcing Chloe to choose between investigating my departure and enjoying her rehearsal dinner. I could pull Ethan aside privately and demand an explanation. Instead, I maintained my smile and nodded slowly. "Thank you for letting me know." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, as if my calm response confused him. He probably expected tears or anger, some emotional reaction he could dismiss as an overreaction. I gave him nothing to work with. He straightened and walked back toward his seat between his parents. I watched Eleanor lean toward him, her lips moving in what looked like a question. He shook his head slightly, and she frowned. I picked up my wine glass and took a measured sip, my hand perfectly steady despite the rage building behind my sternum. The Cabernet tasted like ashes, but I swallowed it anyway. Across the table, Michael caught my eye. "Everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," I assured him, returning to my filet mignon as if nothing had happened. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I engaged in light conversation, laughed at appropriate moments, and appeared completely absorbed in the pleasant evening. Inside, my mind worked through the implications of what Ethan had just done. This wasn't a simple request. This was a power play orchestrated by his parents, designed to establish hierarchy before the marriage even began. They viewed me as beneath them, unworthy of standing beside their family during the ceremony. My self-made success meant nothing compared to their inherited wealth and social connections. More significantly, Ethan had delivered their message without consulting Chloe first. He'd approached me privately, hoping I would either cause a scene or quietly comply. Either outcome would position me as the problem, the difficult mother who couldn't behave appropriately, or the weak woman who accepted disrespect without protest. He'd miscalculated badly. Movement caught my attention. Chloe stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound cut through conversations, drawing everyone's focus. Her face had gone pale except for two bright spots of color high on her cheekbones. "Ethan, could I speak with you outside?" Her voice carried across the room, tight with barely controlled fury. Ethan's confident expression faltered. "Honey, we're in the middle of dinner. Can it wait?" "No." Chloe's single syllable left no room for negotiation. "Outside now." The room fell silent. Every eye tracked their movement as Chloe strode toward the French doors leading to the terrace, not bothering to see if Ethan followed. He hesitated, glancing at his parents for guidance, then reluctantly pushed back his chair. I remained seated, my expression neutral despite my racing pulse. I had no idea what had triggered Chloe's reaction, but I recognized the steel in her voice. She'd inherited my spine along with my eyes. They stepped onto the terrace, visible through the glass doors but out of earshot. Chloe wheeled to face Ethan the moment they cleared the threshold, her hands gesturing sharply as she spoke. Even from inside, I could see the fury radiating from her rigid posture. Ethan's face cycled through confusion, defensiveness, and finally, alarm. As Chloe continued speaking, he reached for her arm, and she jerked away. Her voice rose enough that fragments carried back into the dining room. "My mother, absolutely unacceptable. Who do you think?" Eleanor stood so quickly her napkin fell to the floor. "Someone should intervene before this escalates." "I think we should let them work it out," I said calmly, taking another sip of wine. Her sharp gaze cut to me. "This is clearly upsetting for everyone. Then perhaps your son shouldn't have made upsetting suggestions." I sat down my glass and met her eyes steadily. Arthur's face reddened. "Now see here." The French doors burst open. Chloe stormed back inside, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. Ethan followed, his expression shifting toward panic. Chloe stopped beside my chair, placing one hand protectively on my shoulder. With her other hand, she tugged off her engagement ring and held it up so the diamond caught the chandelier light. "Ethan, find yourself a new wife and a new job," she announced, her voice ringing clear across the stunned silence. She dropped the ring onto Ethan's empty dinner plate with a metallic clink. "Because you just lost both." The room erupted. Gasps and exclamations overlapped as guests processed what they'd witnessed. Brooke grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing hard. Michael half rose from his seat, his protective instincts engaged. Ethan stared at the ring on his plate like it might bite him. "Chloe, you're being irrational." "Let me explain." "Explain what?" Chloe's voice could have stripped paint. "Explain how you thought it was acceptable to uninvite my mother from our wedding without discussing it with me first. Explain how you let your parents dictate who gets to attend the most important day of my life. Please, Ethan, enlighten me." Eleanor stepped forward, her pearls clicking together. "Chloe, dear, if you just calm down and listen to reason." "Don't you dare tell me to calm down." Chloe rounded on her, and Eleanor actually took a step back. "You don't get to exclude my mother from my wedding because you think she's not good enough for your precious family's standards. She built a successful company from nothing. She raised me as a single parent after my father passed away. She's the strongest person I know, and I will not tolerate anyone disrespecting her." Arthur found his voice. "Young lady, you're making a scene over a simple misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." Chloe cut him off without hesitation. "Ethan told my mother she wasn't welcome at our wedding. He suggested she watch online." Those were his exact words, and Brooke heard them, too. All eyes swung to Brooke, who nodded. Confirmation. I was close enough to overhear. He said his parents didn't want her there. We simply thought, Eleanor began. I don't care what you thought. Chloe's voice dropped to something dangerous and quiet. You don't get a vote. This was supposed to be my wedding, and you've turned it into a referendum on my family's worth. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in showing everyone here exactly what kind of people you are. Ethan finally managed to speak. Chloe, please. We can fix this. My parents didn't mean, your parents meant exactly what they said. Chloe looked at him with something close to pity. And you went along with it. You approached my mother at a table full of people, hoping to handle this without me finding out. You chose their prejudice over my happiness. Over us? How did you even know? Ethan asked weakly. Olivia was coming back from the restroom when she heard you talking to Mom. She texted me immediately. Chloe gestured toward her cousin, who sat near the back looking simultaneously guilty and defiant. Thank goodness someone in this room has loyalty. I stood slowly, placing my hand over Chloe's where it still rested on my shoulder. Sweetheart, you don't have to do this. We can talk privately. No, Mom. Chloe's eyes shone with unshed tears, but her voice remained firm. We're done talking. Ethan made his choice. He chose his parents' approval over our relationship. I won't marry someone who thinks my family isn't good enough to witness our vows. She turned back to Ethan, who stood frozen beside his untouched dinner plate. I'll have someone collect my things from your apartment tomorrow. Please don't contact me. Chloe, be reasonable, Arthur started. I'm being extremely reasonable, Chloe interrupted. I could have married your son, moved into his world, and spent the rest of my life proving I belong there. Instead, I'm choosing self-respect. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. She looked around the room, addressing all the stunned guests. I apologize for ruining the evening. The wedding is obviously cancelled. Thank you all for your support and understanding. With that, she picked up her clutch from the table and walked toward the exit with her head high. I followed, Michael falling into step beside us. Brooke grabbed her coat and hurried to catch up. Behind us, the dining room exploded into chaos. Raised voices and accusations flew as Ethan's family tried to salvage the situation. I caught fragments about overreactions and ungrateful behavior, but I didn't slow down to listen. We reached the parking lot before Chloe's composure finally cracked. She leaned against my car, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I wrapped my arms around her, holding tight while she cried out her heartbreak and fury. I loved him, she whispered against my shoulder. I thought he loved me. I know, baby. I know. They were never going to accept us, were they? They were always going to see us as less than. I stroked her hair, choosing my words carefully. Some people measure worth by the wrong standards. That's their limitation, not yours. Michael and Brooke stood a respectful distance away, giving us space while remaining close enough to help if needed. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from the estate's gardens, incongruously beautiful against the ugliness we just experienced. What happens now? Chloe asked, pulling back to wipe her eyes. Her mascara had run, leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. Now we go home, I said firmly. We'll deal with logistics tomorrow. Tonight, we just breathe. I meant with work. Ethan's project manager. I can't see him every day. Leave that to me, I assured her. You focus on taking care of yourself. The business side will sort itself out. We drove home in silence. Chloe curled in the passenger seat while I navigated familiar streets. She'd been living in her own apartment downtown, but she directed me toward my house instead. Some hurts required your childhood bedroom and your mother's presence. I settled her into her old room, now serving as my guest space, but still containing pieces of her adolescence, her debate team trophy on the bookshelf, the vintage poster from her favorite concert. Small anchors to remind her who she was before Ethan entered her life. Try to sleep, I suggested, pulling the curtains closed. Tomorrow will be easier. Will it? She looked young and lost. Nothing like the fierce woman who'd faced down her ex-fiancé an hour earlier. Eventually, I promised. Maybe not tomorrow specifically, but eventually. After she finally drifted into exhausted sleep, I went to my home office and opened my laptop. The business aspects couldn't wait until morning, not with this much potential fallout. I drafted an email to our HR director, Sarah, requesting a meeting first thing Monday morning. Ethan's behavior constituted a serious conflict of interest, creating a hostile work environment for Chloe. His position had become untenable the moment he chose to disrespect a senior executive's family member. Beyond that, I needed to protect the company from any retaliation. Arthur's real estate connections might give him leverage in the business community. Eleanor ran in social circles that could influence potential clients. I'd spent 2 decades building Hawthorne and Associates, and I wouldn't let their wounded pride threaten what I created. My phone buzzed with incoming messages. Michael checking if we made it home safely. Brooke asking if Chloe needed anything. 2 of Chloe's other bridesmaids expressing shock and support. Even my attorney, who'd apparently heard about the incident through his wife, who'd been seated near the back of the dining room. I responded to each with brief updates, then turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring more fallout, but tonight I needed to think strategically. The wedding cancellation would create logistical nightmares. Deposits to recover, vendors to notify, guests to inform. Chloe had paid for most expenses herself, determined to maintain independence even for her wedding. But I quietly covered several major items, including the venue and catering. I'd need to review those contracts and determine what could be recovered. More concerning was the professional impact. Ethan had worked on 3 major client accounts currently in progress. We'd need to reassign those projects without disrupting client relationships or revealing the personal drama behind the personnel change. I mentally reviewed our project management team, considering who could absorb Ethan's workload smoothly. By 3 a.m, I drafted a comprehensive action plan, addressing every angle I could anticipate. Only then did I allow myself to process the personal violation of Ethan's behavior. He'd looked me in the eye and delivered his parents' rejection like it meant nothing. Like decades of work and achievement counted for less than their arbitrary standards of social acceptability. Like I should feel grateful for access to a live stream of my only daughter's wedding. The rage I'd suppressed during dinner finally surfaced, hot and acidic. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call Ethan and explain exactly what he'd thrown away. I wanted to confront Eleanor and Arthur, making them understand the damage their prejudice had caused. Instead, I pulled up my company's financial records and began analyzing our position. Revenge served cold required careful preparation, and I'd learned long ago that the best response to disrespect was undeniable success. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Chloe emerged from her room with swollen eyes but a determined expression. I'm going to work, she announced over coffee. Are you sure? You could take a few days. And do what? Sit here feeling sorry for myself? She shook her head. I'd rather stay busy. Besides, hiding makes it seem like I did something wrong. Pride swelled in my chest. All right, but if you need to leave early, no questions asked. We arrived at the office separately, maintaining our usual professional boundaries. I watched Chloe walk through the creative department with her head high, greeting colleagues normally, despite the whispers that followed her path. She'd inherited more than my eyes and spine. She'd absorbed my refusal to let other people's opinions dictate her behavior. My meeting with Sarah, our HR director, lasted 90 minutes. We reviewed Ethan's employment contract, documented the conflict of interest, and established protocols for his departure. I decided against termination for a cause, which might trigger legal complications. Instead, we'd accept his resignation, which I felt confident he'd provide once he understood his position was no longer viable. Ethan appeared in my office doorway at 11:30, looking like he hadn't slept. We need to talk. Come in. Close the door. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same seat where I'd interviewed him 4 years ago when he'd seemed bright and ambitious and worthy of opportunity. He sat heavily, running his hands through disheveled hair. I made a mistake. You made several, I corrected, but let's focus on the professional implications rather than the personal ones. I never meant to hurt Chloe. My parents were pressuring me, and I thought if I could just handle it quietly. You thought you could exclude me from my daughter's wedding without her finding out? I kept my voice level, professional. That demonstrates remarkably poor judgment for someone in project management, where transparency and stakeholder communication are essential. Ethan flinched. I know. I'm sorry. I want to fix this. The personal situation is between you and Chloe. And frankly, I don't see how you fix telling your fiancé's mother she's not good enough for your family's presence. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Professionally, however, we need to address the conflict of interest your actions have created. What conflict? His voice rose defensively. You've created a hostile work environment for a senior executive's family member through your personal behavior. That's textbook conflict of interest. I slid the folder across my desk. Sarah and I have reviewed your contract. I'm offering you the opportunity to resign with 2 months severance and a neutral reference letter. The alternative is termination for cause, which looks considerably worse on your employment record. The color drained from his face. You're firing me because your daughter broke up with me? I'm offering you a graceful exit because you demonstrated profound disrespect toward a member of this company's leadership family, which compromises your ability to work here effectively. I leaned back in my chair. You're an intelligent person, Ethan. Surely you recognize this outcome was inevitable the moment you chose your parents' prejudice over Chloe's trust. This is revenge, he accused. You're punishing me for hurting her. This is consequences, I corrected. You created an untenable situation through your own choices. I'm simply managing the professional fallout in the way that least disrupts our ongoing client work. He stared at the folder without opening it. What if I refuse? What if I want to stay and prove I can still do my job? Then we'll proceed with termination for cause, and you can explain to future employers why you were fired from a company where your ex-fiancé works. I met his eyes steadily. I'm offering you dignity, Ethan. I suggest you take it. The fight drained out of him visibly. He opened the folder, scanning the resignation letter already prepared with today's date. 2-month severance contingent on signing a non-disparagement agreement and transitioning your current projects smoothly to other team members over the next 2 weeks. I'd already assigned his accounts to 3 different project managers who'd agreed to absorb the extra work. We'll announce your departure as a mutual decision to pursue other opportunities. No drama, no blame. He picked up the pen I placed on top of the folder. His hand trembled slightly as he signed the resignation letter, dating it and sliding it back across the desk. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I really did love her. I just wasn't strong enough to choose her over my family's expectations. Then you didn't love her enough, I replied simply. Love requires courage, especially when it means standing against people you care about. You chose comfort over her. She deserves better. Ethan left my office looking smaller than when he'd entered. I felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only grim acceptance that some lessons required painful teaching. The next 2 weeks passed in controlled chaos. Ethan completed his project transitions professionally, avoiding Chloe except when absolutely necessary for work purposes. She maintained her composure, treating him with cool professionalism that must have cost her tremendous effort. During this period, I discovered just how deeply the Callahan family's influence ran through certain social circles. An invitation to speak at a regional business conference was quietly rescinded without explanation. A networking event I'd attended for 5 consecutive years suddenly had no available tickets when I tried to register. Small slights that individually meant nothing, but collectively painted a clear picture of coordinated social exclusion. I documented each incident methodically, building a file of their retaliation efforts. Sarah from HR suggested we might have grounds for a defamation case if they were actively damaging our business reputation. I declined. Legal action would only drag us further into their orbit, giving them continued relevance in our lives. Instead, I doubled down on what I did best. I personally reached out to 3 potential clients I'd been courting for months, offering presentations of our capabilities. 2 of the 3 signed contracts within the week. The 3rd requested a follow-up meeting, impressed by my direct approach and the portfolio Chloe had helped compile. My business mentor, a woman named Brenda, who'd built her own consulting empire 3 decades earlier, called to check on me after hearing rumors through professional networks. Let them play their petty games, she advised over coffee. People with real power don't need to tear others down. They're showing everyone exactly how insecure they really are. Her words proved prophetic. Within days, I started receiving calls from other business owners who'd experienced similar treatment from the Callahan family over the years. Apparently, Arthur and Eleanor had a pattern of weaponizing their social connections against anyone they perceived as threatening or inferior. Their behavior had created more enemies than allies, though most people had been too intimidated to speak openly about it. One caller, a successful restaurant owner named Leo, shared his own story of being blackballed from certain venues after his daughter chose not to marry into a family the Callahans approved of. They think their money makes them untouchable, he said bitterly. But times are changing. People care less about old money and more about actual character these days. Vendor cancellations proceeded smoothly. Most wedding suppliers were understanding, particularly after I explained the circumstances in vague terms about irreconcilable differences. We recovered roughly 60% of deposits, losing money on several items, but nothing catastrophic. Guest notifications proved trickier. Chloe insisted on personally calling close family and friends rather than sending impersonal messages. I listened to her repeat the same explanation dozens of times, her voice growing steadier with each conversation. By the end of the week, she'd developed a practiced response that acknowledged the situation without dwelling on details. The social fallout arrived through unexpected channels. 3 clients with country club connections to the Callahan family requested meetings to discuss their ongoing projects. I suspected Arthur or Eleanor had suggested they reconsider their business relationships with Hawthorne and Associates. I met each client personally, bringing our best work samples and detailed progress reports. 2 of the 3 seemed satisfied that personal drama wouldn't impact professional delivery. The third, a commercial development company with close ties to Arthur's business, terminated their contract despite our flawless execution to date. I absorbed the loss without protest. Clients who could be swayed by gossip weren't worth keeping long-term anyway. Chloe threw herself into work with fierce dedication, producing some of her best creative output despite the emotional turmoil. She redesigned a national restaurant chain's entire visual identity in 3 weeks, earning praise from both the client and our creative director. She landed a luxury hotel account through a pitch so stunning our competitors didn't stand a chance. Watching her channel heartbreak into professional excellence reminded me why I built this company in the first place, not just to create financial security, but to provide a space where talented people could thrive based on merit rather than connections or pedigree. 6 weeks after the canceled wedding, Michael flew back from Portland for a scheduled board meeting. Over dinner afterward, he raised his wine glass in a toast. To Chloe, he announced, whose courage reminds us why character matters more than comfort. Chloe smiled. The first genuine expression of happiness I'd seen since that terrible rehearsal dinner. I'll drink to that. Have you heard anything from Ethan? Michael asked carefully. Not since he finished his exit transition. Chloe swirled her wine thoughtfully. I heard through mutual friends that he's working for his father's company now. Apparently Arthur created a position for him after he couldn't find anything comparable elsewhere. The neutral reference letter didn't help, I asked. It helped him not get rejected outright, Chloe explained. But word travels in professional circles. People know what happened, even if they don't know all the details. Project managers who create conflicts of interest aren't exactly in high demand. Michael nodded slowly. What about his parents? Any further contact? Eleanor tried calling once, I admitted. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail suggesting we should discuss the situation like mature adults. I deleted it. Good, Chloe said firmly. They don't deserve your time or energy. 3 months after the canceled wedding, our company landed its largest contract to date. A national retail chain wanted a complete rebrand, including logo redesign, packaging updates, and digital presence overhaul. The project was worth more than our previous year's revenue combined. Chloe led the creative team, producing concepts that transformed the client's vision into visual excellence. The client loved everything she presented, often approving designs with minimal revision. Her portfolio grew stronger with each successful delivery. During the celebration dinner after we'd signed the final contract, Chloe pulled me aside. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. My heart clenched. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just realized something today while presenting to the client. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Walking away from Ethan was the best decision I ever made. Oh, sweetheart. Let me finish. She smiled, and I saw a peace in her expression that had been absent for months. I spent 14 months planning a wedding to someone who fundamentally didn't respect where I came from. I was so focused on the future I wanted that I ignored all the signs showing me who he really was. His parents' subtle condescension. The way he changed the subject when I talked about our family history. Little moments I explained away because I loved him. You couldn't have known. But I could have, she interrupted gently. I just didn't want to see it. And if Olivia hadn't overheard him that night, I might have married him anyway. I might have spent years trying to prove I belonged in his world while slowly losing myself. I pulled her into a hug, blinking back tears. You're stronger than I ever was at your age. I learned from the best. She squeezed me tight. You showed me that success built through your own effort means more than status inherited from family connections. Ethan and his parents will never understand that. And honestly, I don't care anymore. 6 months after the canceled wedding, I received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Sincere apology." Ethan had written a lengthy message explaining that he'd spent months in therapy working through his relationship patterns and family dynamics. He acknowledged the harm he'd caused, took full responsibility for his choices, and expressed genuine remorse for his behavior. He didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, just wanted Chloe and me to know he understood the magnitude of his mistakes. I forwarded it to Chloe without comment, letting her decide how to respond. She called me that evening. "Did you read his email?" I did. "Do you think he means it?" I considered carefully. I think he's grown enough to recognize what he lost. Whether that translates to genuine change, I can't say. People rarely transform completely, especially when it requires standing against family pressure that's been present their whole lives. That's what I thought too, Chloe said. I'm not going to respond. He made his choices, and I've made mine. I hope therapy helps him become a better person, but that's not my responsibility anymore. That's very mature of you. I'm trying. She paused. Actually, there's something else I wanted to tell you. I've been seeing someone. My eyebrows rose. Oh. His name is James. He works in urban planning for the city. We met at a community development meeting I attended for the hotel project. Warmth colored her voice. He's kind and thoughtful, and when I told him about my family, he asked genuine questions about your business journey. He thinks building something from nothing is admirable, not embarrassing. I'd like to meet him, I said carefully. I was hoping you'd say that. How about dinner this weekend? Just the three of us, nothing fancy. James turned out to be exactly as Chloe described, thoughtful, curious, genuinely interested in both her work and our family history. He asked about my early business challenges with real engagement, laughing at my stories about pitching clients from my garage apartment. You started with basically nothing, he said over dessert. That must have required incredible resilience. It required stubbornness and probably some foolishness, I corrected with a smile. But yes, resilience, too. You learn quickly when failure means losing everything. My mom built her own business, too, James offered. She started a community garden program in Cleveland that's now in 12 cities. I grew up watching her fight for funding and navigate bureaucracy. It gave me huge respect for anyone who builds something meaningful from scratch. I caught Chloe's eye across the table. Her expression radiated happiness, but also something deeper. Peace, confidence, the certainty that comes from knowing you made the right choice, even when it cost you everything you thought you wanted. A year after the canceled wedding, Hawthorne and Associates celebrated its best financial year ever. Revenue had grown 42%, driven largely by projects Chloe's exceptional creative work had helped secure. We'd expanded into 2 new markets and hired 8 additional employees. At our annual company celebration, I stood to make the traditional founder's toast. But instead of my usual remarks about teamwork and dedication, I went off script. This year taught me something important. I began, looking around at the faces of people who'd helped build this company. Success isn't just about revenue growth or client acquisition. It's about maintaining integrity when pressured to compromise. It's about standing firm in your values, even when it costs you opportunities or relationships. It's about recognizing that some doors close precisely because you were never meant to walk through them. I raised my glass toward Chloe, who sat at a table with James and several colleagues. To everyone here who chooses character over convenience, may we continue building something worth being proud of. The room erupted in applause. Chloe's eyes shone with unshed tears, but she smiled broadly and raised her own glass in return. Later, as guests mingled and celebrated, Michael pulled me aside. "You know, the Callahan family lost their biggest commercial development deal last month, right?" I blinked. I hadn't heard. Arthur's company was set to develop that new waterfront district downtown. The City Planning Commission rejected their proposal. Michael grinned. Apparently, someone on the commission had concerns about their ethical track record and community engagement approach. They awarded the contract to a different developer known for more inclusive practices. "That's unfortunate for them," I said neutrally. "James sits on the planning commission," Michael continued casually. As the urban planning director, he had significant input on the decision. I absorbed this information carefully. Did Chloe know? According to James, she specifically asked him not to let the relationship influence his professional judgment. He evaluated the Callahan proposal on its merits and found it lacking. Michael's smile widened. Turns out their company has a history of displacing low-income residents without proper relocation assistance. The commission felt that didn't align with the city's values. "Interesting," I murmured. "Karma works in mysterious ways," Michael observed. "Sometimes it just needs a little help from people who care about doing the right thing." I watched Chloe and James laughing together across the room, their body language radiating comfort and genuine connection. She'd found someone who respected her family, valued her accomplishments, and shared her commitment to ethical behavior. More importantly, she'd learned to recognize the difference between someone who claimed to love her and someone who actually did. The canceled wedding that had seemed like a catastrophe had actually been salvation. Ethan's cruelty had revealed his true character before Chloe legally bound herself to someone fundamentally incompatible with her values. His parents' prejudice had exposed the reality she would have faced as part of their family. Walking away had cost her a wedding, but it had saved her from a marriage that would have slowly eroded her sense of self-worth. Sometimes the greatest gift is a future you avoid rather than the one you build. Sometimes strength means recognizing when the door closing in your face is actually opening the path towards something better. Sometimes revenge is simply living well while those who wronged you face the natural consequences of their own behavior. I raised my glass in a silent toast to all the people who'd ever been told they weren't good enough, weren't the right kind of people, didn't belong. To everyone who'd chosen dignity over acceptance, self-respect over social climbing, authenticity over approval. And especially to my daughter, who'd faced down prejudice with her head high and her values intact, refusing to diminish herself to fit someone else's limited vision of who deserved respect. The rehearsal dinner disaster had ended one story, but it had begun another. And this new story, written on our own terms, with people who valued us properly, promised to be far more satisfying than the fairy tale we'd narrowly escaped. Has there ever been a moment in your life where a big setback turned out to be your greatest escape?